Milken Community High School, Kemper Mountain, California, and my home synagogue right here at Adat Ariel. How did I end up here? What are some values that have been passed down from generation to generation? What is my story? What is my narrative? Take a listen. The year was 1938. This is when my family's journey to America began. My grandfather, Rabbi Tzvi Dershowitz, considers himself lucky, having escaped his native country, Czechoslovakia, just days before the Nazis invaded.
Story. There's a lot of drama to it. Essentially, if it wasn't for 33 days, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be alive. That's because my birth in Czechoslovakia, we had a wonderful family. I got to tell you, my parents were as content and happy in shul as they were at the opera. So we had a very cultured but extremely, it's not Orthodox, it's just Jewish life. I didn't know that some people don't go to shul on Shabbat. And we were members of Maccabi, sports. My parents sent me skiing with Maccabi when I was 8 years old in the Carpathian Mountains, But make a very long story short, my grandfather, when he heard about Hitler and saw what was going on, 37, 38, brought my father and his brothers together, and he said, this anti-Semite is different from all others, and no matter how much wealth we had, my parents said, we're going, and we left and we came to America 33 days before Hitler marched in.
Despite leaving everything he knew and had behind in Czechoslovakia, my grandfather has never blamed God nor even felt a disconnect from God.
I remember when we left my city, Brno, in Czechoslovakia, or where my mom used to live, her parents, I said goodbye to my grandparents. Nobody knew there was going to be Shoah. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that, that somebody's going to kill somebody? So some people say, you see, how could their God have done it? I don't feel disconnected with God, because I feel that it's just like if somebody would break into your house. Is it because God told him or because he made the decision, the crook made the decision himself? So I cannot blame God for anything. I can only have faith that faith in God gives me inner strength to go on. And once in a while something terrible happens, and then I need more of it. I don't need less of it. That's like saying, you have 4 children, which one do you love more than the others?
My grandfather says his connection to God stems from his knowledge that we are not alone in this world, that something greater exists.
How do you feel close to God? Well, certainly when things go wonderful, and when things go horrible, then I also feel that I'm not alone in this world. There is something beyond me that helps me or gives me joy, both, beside what I can do. I'm not that capable of solving all the problems or having all of the joy in the world. There's something beyond me. Now, the question is, what is the definition of something? Mm-hmm. And I feel that is the presence of God in my life.
Each day, he says, brings him a new and different outlook on life.
Today, whatever happened today certainly changed my outlook. But tomorrow it's going to be different.
When studying Torah and learning about the Jewish narrative, my grandfather says interpretation is key.
God has hands. Biyat chazakah was that God took us from Egypt with a strong hand and outstretched arm. God has hands. God has arms. So I got to interpret it another way. And that's what makes it very flexible. I'm sorry. My father had one particular view of Judaism. My grandfather is still another, his father another. So I'm allowed to interpret and continue to interpret. That's why the Talmud took 700 years. If we knew it, then we'd do it in one generation. But every generation interpreted differently. So that's why it took 700 years, and interpretation is the is the rich part of Judaism.
Which Jewish value, according to my grandfather, is the most important one? Well, there may not be one definite answer.
Maimonides come up with 13 principles. What should I choose from those 13 principles and say only one is correct? Which of the 613 mitzvot is most important? You know what? If somebody is ill, the mitzvah bikur cholim, to visit the ill, that's the most important. But if somebody is hungry, and the mitzvah is to give tzedakah, give bread, that to that person is most important. So, frankly, it depends on the moment, what my need is, and how Judaism responds to that particular moment.
What is the most important value in today's world?
Well, one of them is because of what's going on in the world today with the end of 2013, there's probably more war and contention and fighting among not so much nations, but groups within nations and different cultures. It seemed to me acceptance of the other person would be one of the most important. Acceptance, I think, would be a very important universal value.
How did my grandfather pass down values to his children?
And I was able to impact my children up to age 18 or so. Then it's important for them to be independent of me.
My mom, Nomi, is one of my grandfather's children, and she believes that we have succeeded at passing down old traditions as well as creating new ones.
It's important to create family traditions, and I think we've created many of those. Some of them are just fun things that we do year to year or week to week even, that we started with our own family but continue. And some things are acknowledging modern events in our lifetime and history that we feel is important to incorporate into our daily lives.
My mom says she has had a new perspective on life ever since she had children.
My outlook on life has definitely changed when my children came into my life, and changed for the better, but also flipped upside down many things that I had previously thought of. My values changed, what seemed to be important to me changed, and I can't say it was a rejection of my previous values, but definitely added to the values that I had.
What makes you feel closer to God?
My children make me feel closer to God. When a mother gives birth, I think it's instantly a religious experience. It's a very humbling experience, and it, for me anyway, made me feel things on a spiritual plane that I hadn't felt before, perhaps. Makes you realize that there's so much more in the world that is beyond your own self, or one's own self. We acknowledge
Like my grandfather, my mom believes that interpretation is an important part of Judaism.
Interpretation is everything. It really forms how we view a particular text, how we view a particular value, and we see it even modernly. I studied law, and the study of the Constitution, of the U.S. Constitution, for example, is very much like the study of Chumash or another text. I think it started.
My mom says that an important value that contemporary society needs more than ever is humility.
Something that I think in some ways we're missing in our society of Hollywood and of showiness and all of that. I think we need to get back a little bit to being humble and listening to one another and valuing one another and being kind to one another.
And now it's time to interview my twin brother, Noah. This is the test that will show whether the values that my grandfather and mother believe in were truly passed down. The Jewish narrative means, what does it consist of? What is the Jewish narrative in your opinion?
I think the Jewish narrative is refers to the collective Jewish experience that has characterized our history. It's basically our story and how that's been shaped by our experiences in our long history.
Similar to my mom and grandfather, my brother also has a positive outlook on life.
There's always something positive, I think, to come out of most events. There's usually in my experience a positive perspective on things, and life is more meaningful and more happy, which I think is what everybody wants when you look at things positive. Everybody has problems, and it's just a matter of how willing you are to solve them.
Unlike my grandfather and mom, my brother does have a favorite Jewish holiday.
I think
Yeah.
Shabbat,
Shabbat.
to me most instills Jewish values because Shabbat is a time when I can observe it. It's a time where in which I can nurture my relationships with people. It's a time where I can fulfill what I see as God's purpose and help people and whatnot. So I think Shabbat, because it's kind of a restful time, allows you to focus on being a better person.
When does my brother feel most connected to God?
I feel close to God whenever I experience something that seems kind of miraculous or that seems unlikely. I do. In my Jewish studies class, we've learned about like kind of faith versus reason. So I believe in science as far as it can go, but I think there are some things that science and reason as far as it can go, but I think there are some things in our world that just can't be explained.
Although he does feel disconnected to God when he thinks about world atrocities, such as the Holocaust.
I'm most disconnected to God whenever I hear about, read about, see directly some sort of injustice. When I visited Auschwitz, or Treblinka, or Majdanek, any of the other camps in Poland and Eastern Europe, I felt very disconnected to God.
Contrary to my mom's generation and my grandfather's generation, my brother feels that his Jewish and secular world are integrated.
My Jewish and secular worlds are pretty integrated, even if I do have even if I do believe in reason and logic before I believe in scriptural ideals. So I would say they're integrated. So it's hard for me to just say I've contributed this to the secular world and not to the Jewish world. For me, it's kind of like one world.
Thank you. Well, we've seen it. 3 generations, 3 journeys, and although some values have changed, we've seen one narrative. Reporting, I'm Eytan Wallace.